Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn and this is the 10 by 9 podcast. In a troubled world, isn't it great to have the shelter of stories to give us some comfort? And there are 3 cracking stories in this podcast for you.
Granny Rose received our envelope, reviewed it, took a drag of her vape and said, "Oh, that's lovely, Bevin," quickly followed by, "What is it anyway?" She thought it was some sort of weather map.
I was asked by a Skenos staffer if I'd head up a wee creative writing group, as well as drive the minibus, but not at the same time.
Sally sniffed the bottle and then tentatively took a sip, and she too coughed and spluttered, for the bottle contained not holy water, but poaching.
3 wonderful stories, all told in 2023. So let's kick off with the first of them, and it was told in our home venue in Belfast at the Black Box in June. The theme was Journey. There is some very mild distortion on the mic, but believe me, you will barely notice because the story is so good. Here's Bevin O'Donnell.
Tears of happiness, a squeal of delight, perhaps an ecstatic jump for joy. That's what I'd been expecting. That's the scene romantic movies had primed me for, what Mel Gibson and Richard Gere had been selling to me since I was a love-struck teenager watching Runaway Bride. Turns out life isn't always like that. I had had quite some time to think about and plan for this moment. Along with the romantic movies I'd grown up on, the reliable sources of Instagram, Twitter and Google provided endless inspiration. There were reels, videos and lists, the 10 best ways to, or 5 top tips for. Having considered the options, I decided to opt for the element of surprise, thinking it would make it even more special. It was his birthday and also our anniversary. Excellent timing. I decided to incorporate the surprise into his gift. I meticulously wrapped the special item along with the rest of the ordinary birthday presents. I put it in the gift bag at the bottom. After what felt like a very long day, the time came for the big reveal. My unsuspecting partner unwrapped his birthday gifts. Some socks, a book about Krakow for our upcoming trip, some fancy cooking ingredients. He was looking very happy with his birthday haul so far. Smiling at me, he opened each present. He got to the bottom of the bag. Opening one of the last of the gifts, he unfolded a perfectly white and deliciously cute baby grow. His face whitened. He looked at me wide-eyed. He didn't say a word. After a while, I went and got him a glass of water. And so my husband's journey to parenthood began. Mine, of course, had already started early that morning with those 2 blue lines that can only mean one thing: we were going to be parents. Whilst the shock when it actually happened, it wasn't really much of a surprise, as we've been planning on this for quite a while. Often, though, something happening in theory and its actual reality are quite different. I didn't see it at the time, but this not quite to plan reveal was just the beginning of me realising that the path ahead was not going to be what I was expecting. In fact, I would come to learn that everything I thought I knew about pregnancy, birth and parenthood was, in fact, wrong. I've always been one for throwing myself wholeheartedly into whatever project or task I happened to have at that time, and this was no different. With the appearance of those 2 lines, my course was set and I launched myself into all things pregnancy, birth and baby related, earnestly taking on the task of learning how to be a mum. In hindsight, I approached it like some sort of exam, as though if I just read enough and prepared enough, I'd be able to ace the whole thing. My research opened my eyes to a world I didn't know about, a world of birthrights and feminism, of grassroots campaigns and activist mums, where women's voices are not only promoted but central. I found myself having strong opinions on topics I didn't even know existed. It was fascinating. In between all my swatting, I took a break so we could inform our friends and family of the exciting news. We decided to continue with the element of surprise theme, seeing as it had worked so well the first time. Instead of coming straight out and telling people I was pregnant, we mysteriously handed them envelopes to unveil the news via the 12-week scan. At first, this plan worked well. My sister had reacted as they were meant to, whooping with excitement and delight. My mother-in-law danced around the kitchen. It was all going swimmingly until it came to time my Granny Rose. Granny Rose received our envelope, reviewed it, took a drag of her vape and said, "Oh, that's lovely, Bevin," quickly followed by, "What is it anyway?" She thought it was some sort of weather map. We told everyone on the St. Patrick's Day weekend of 2020, and that was the most exciting thing that happened that weekend. Until the apocalypse arrived. March 2020, the beginning of COVID-19, 12 weeks pregnant in a pandemic. None of the books mentioned how to navigate that. Pregnant women were added to the high-risk list. The world was falling apart, yet for us it was also coming together. My belly swelled and I continued to assiduously work my way through book after book. For us, in many ways, it was actually a lovely time. The world slowed down. We didn't dash about as much from one commitment to the next. My husband and I walked about the countryside a lot. There wasn't much else to do. We spent a lot of time together. Though at the same time, it was stressful. I was worried. I was worried a lot about what this would all mean, if everyone would be okay, about giving birth and how that would look in a pandemic. The rules were extremely strict. I had heard some people were being told their partners couldn't be with them in labour. I had heard of people labouring whilst wearing face masks. Would my husband be with me? If not, would I be able to cope alone? I was glad of all my reading then. It helped me learn of my rights and what I could ask for. Things were very uncertain. Perhaps our baby picked up on this, because she was in no hurry at all to enter it. Before her pregnancy, I had heard of estimated due dates, and so expected that's when the baby would come. What I came to learn when pregnant is that these due dates are notoriously wrong. Unlike Amazon parcels, babies' arrivals cannot be easily tracked, and you cannot put in a complaint when they don't come on time. My child was not aware there was a deadline on her arrival into the world. She had no intention of coming until she was good and ready. And so she kept us waiting and waiting and waiting. For weeks we walked on eggshells thinking she could come at any time. I was suddenly the most popular I've ever been, with endless texts asking for updates on whether there were any signs and making recommendations on how to move things along. Every day that passed, the pressure mounted. I was on the clock, the spectre of induction of labour looming over me. I had learned a lot about the process of induction from my research, particularly during COVID. My husband wouldn't be with me. I'd be alone. It was not what we wanted. Those last few weeks were incredibly intense. My husband and I had to advocate for ourselves and what we wanted in an unknown and frightening context. Despite the pressure and our fears, we held true to our convictions. We held off, waiting for the natural process to start. This was what we felt was right for us and our child, given the circumstances. Eventually, it did. When our daughter did decide to make her appearance, she had no intention of doing that quickly either. It took her, all the women in the room, it took her 3 days to come outside. Yet another lesson for me in the journey of unlearning and relearning. From movies and TV, I had learnt that birth was full of drama and was often fast, but I came to understand that for everyone it was different, and for me it was slow and powerful. It in itself was a journey, one that took me inward to the depths of myself, to the fibre of my being. It took me beyond what I thought were the limits of my emotional and physical endurance, teaching me that I was more capable than I thought, perhaps preparing me for the challenges ahead of mothering. I have since read that in labour a woman leaves her body and journeys to the stars to collect the soul of her baby. That's what it felt like, otherworldly, transformational. Not only was my daughter born, but through the process of bringing her into the world, I was also born, reborn as a mother. After all the wishing and excitement, the waiting and wondering what she would be like, I finally saw her little face and held her in my arms. Perfect. My husband was with me the whole time. We had come a long way from that big reveal just a few months ago. We had grown as a couple already. We were finding our voices as parents, as advocates for our child. We were now a family. This part of our journey still only beginning, and yet already eternal, bound by love and a world of change.
Thanks so much, Bevin. How brilliant were you? I hope you'll be back soon with more stories. We're always looking for new storytellers at 10 by 9. That was only Bevin's second time at the microphone. So if you'd like to tell your story, then get in touch at 10by9.com. Even if it's just a whiff of an idea, I'll do my best to help you bring it all together. Okay, on to our next story, and this takes us to Bangor, a seaside town a few miles from Belfast, if you don't know it, and renowned for being classy. We were in the wonderful new venue of Bangor Courthouse on a lovely August day for stories on the theme Proud. Here's Norman Meharry.
Hiya, Bangor. Thanks for having me. I've known of some heteros in my time. Nice folk, if somewhat dull. Too much like myself for anything interesting to happen. A bit too normal. Yet, as they say, a normal person is one you don't know very well. However, before I get to how I came across Capri, a little bit of context. I grew up in the dark east of Belfast. To get to the city where the student life was, you had to run the gauntlet. You had to get down the road. In the 1960s saw the Summer of Love, and Belfast actually grew a few hippies. But they were a bit like tropical flowers in the tundra, you know. And the road then was where you'd get your head in your hand if you were seen wearing a pink nylon shirt. And I had just such a shirt, but I wore my duffel coat buttoned up to the neck. Come 50 years forward, and the same road is all Irish language classes and drama groups seeking to assuage the post-Boney blues. The wee shops of the Golden Mine are now long gone, and the mills are big conglomerates of small businesses and whatnot, and the shipyards is just a memory, and the aircraft factory looks like it's about to be posted back to America. Anyway, on the road sprang up a community hub of sorts. The government was obliged to fund it, as Vemans in West Belfast had and Cultureland. So up pops Skenos, a Greek word that means, how did this get here? It's an enviro building with walls of clematis and weed, the non-smoking type. So here was where Irish language took root in an essentially loyalist community, and the right conditions of tolerance and liberality grew up so that Capri could exist here. How did I get sucked into this? Well, after decades of working for local government, I retired early on a pension, and there was a wee book reading club running in the then brand new Skenos. And a nice girl there asked if there's anyone could do a volunteer driver, as the regular boy had gone and got himself some paid work. Now, my wife volunteered me, as I had once upon a time driven a minibus in a previous job. And if the thing is, if you show that you're willing to do something as a volunteer, the maxim is ever true that you will be put upon. Have you noticed this? I mean, if you give £2 to the hair-lipped donkeys on the TV channel, within hours your email will be stuffed with other people asking you to do the same for them. I was asked by a Skenos staffer if I'd head up a wee creative writing group, as well as drive the minibus, but not at the same time. You see, a big element of Skenos thinking was to reach out to the hard to reach. Draw in those living on the streets and help them rebuild their lives, those who had messed their lives up with the Troubles, ex-prisoners and so on. But the essential thing was that these victims should be drenched with the life experience of those who had somehow not become an outcast. There, but for the grace of God and all that. To be alongside ordinary, dull people like me and become in time ordinary, dull people. Since I had done some teaching, I was persuaded to give the writing group a go. Half a dozen showed up that first meeting. It settled down to a good steady 4 each week. Jim, who was a songwriter, Dave, who was an artist working in mixed media, Billy, my age group, who talked shipyard like it was his personal statement, and John, who bust in from out of town with pages of an ongoing epic scribbled out. Last of all was Big Craze, who read out a verse of one rhyme from a journal, lots of it, the same rhyme endlessly. We applauded, of course, because you had to be positive, that was understood. One thing was, Big Craze was into face furniture. So much of it that a lot of it was subturating in piercings, wounds and whatnot. And I couldn't look at him because I'm a squeamish. This is my problem, not his. And I don't know how he ever got through airport security. Anyway, as a group, we spent most of our time talking what we were about rather than writing. So Big Crazy had this brilliant idea of build a poem kits to be produced by us and distributed on the road, free to people who were out shopping, in case they felt a poem coming on, you know. Anyway, we thought, it's not a great idea. I don't know about that, Anyway, Big Craze wasn't impressed, and he disappeared from the group. But along came, one door shuts, another opens, along came Capri. When Capri enters our room for that first time, Jim and Dave receive him as a long-lost friend. It appears they've been friends for a while. I'm trying to take Capri in, who is dapper, real Savile Row, in what must be a bespoke suit with waistcoat, two-tone brogues that remind me of a Studebaker with white-wall tires, and a silk shirt and a hazy silk tie with a pin. And he had a Stetson with the brim rakishly portraying, And Capri sits smiling this most laser smile, chatting easily with the boys while fixing his eyes on me. "Oh, you're welcome in, Capri," I said. The rest of us being casually dressed in our duds, Capri shines out like a precious jewel amongst the paste. And he starts to remove his kid gloves, finger by finger. Capri produces from his satchel a tablet, oh my God, a tablet, and reads off it exquisitely, a narrative no worse than anything that we had produced. Capri deigns us with an audience for almost an hour and becomes the group's focal. Capri elocutes beautifully in a Wildian fashion. And of all of it, the only thing I remember now is he said, "Sometimes bad people happen to good things." And I thought, that is Oscar to a T. Anyway, once Capri withdraws, we adjourn for coffee and drift back to our dull lives. Apparently, Capri is as East Belfast as I am, according to Jim. Capri appeared in our writing group once more, and it was always like the sun coming out. Who wanted to hear our tedious little jottings when Capri could regale us with his uptown tales, like being filleted from the ultra-slim loons in a boutique try-on closet? Capri lamented, "Oh, my stars, if I could have screwed my feet off, I could have avoided it." You see? Anyway, there was to be a festival of sorts, and our little writing group knocked some pages about local history up. It was to take place on the, believe it or not, the flat roof of Skynos. They got palleted wood from somewhere and they made a big fence round it, but it was 12 foot high, and the joiner did that bit and he cleared off. And then it was up to us to paint it. Well, Jim, Dave and I, all we had was some brushes, a few tins of paint, and the only person with a head for heights was me. So we had no ladder because Skynos wouldn't allow us to use a step ladder because we weren't trained to use a step ladder. So put a stool down, put another stool on top of a stool, and I got up on it. And I'm standing there with a tin in this hand and a brush and trying to paint these hard-to-get bits. And Jim's down below doing the easy bits. And I'm wobbling about there. Anyway, all was going well until I heard the boys say, "Oh, hiya, Capri. Gosh, you're looking swell." And I couldn't easily turn because the paint surface was this close to me and I'm trying to paint like this. And all of a sudden, I could hear Capri sniggering and saying, "Ah, love your colour, ducky, but why don't you try putting it on the fence? And that caused me to twist my head, and whoops, off I fell. And I believe it was seeing the alternative Capri wearing a dress. And he was truly gorgeous, blinged, legs to die for in kitten heels, a face heavenly idol, makeup not overdone, just right, and a little fascinator to the side of his head. Where are we going? And I'm sure Capri told us. But I had 4 litres of egg yolk emulsion to clean up, as well as that which was on me. Yes, Humpty had his great fall, but cinders went to the ball.
Thanks so much, Norman, and best wishes to Capri. Oh, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing this, but as you know, 10 by 9 is always free, and it's very important to us that it is free because, firstly, I love free stuff. Secondly, no one should ever feel they can't afford to come to 10 by 9. And thirdly, no one should feel their story isn't worth an admission fee. That would put off the very people we seek to attract. So, this is just to say a big thank you to everyone who has donated either at Patreon, the link in the website, or at the live events. We are truly grateful. Okay, here's our third and final story for this podcast. It was told in Port Stewart's Flowerfield Arts Centre, another gorgeous venue on the north coast. And it was May when the theme was family. Here's Gloria O'Connor.
We're always closer to some members of our extended family than to others. And no family is perfect. You know what they say, every family has at least one weird relative. If you don't know who it is, then it's probably you. Now, I have a lot of cousins, over 70 to be precise. And there are a few who I would hardly know if I fell over them in the street. The ones that we were closest to when we were growing up were actually the ones who lived furthest away, and actually were our second cousins. They lived in Dublin. My Aunt Sally had married a Dublin man and moved there in the 1950s. She was widowed at a young age, but continued to live in Dublin with her married daughter, my cousin, her son-in-law, and their 2 children, who were my playmates, and who I have remained close to ever since. My cousin, also called Gloria, usually shortened to Glo, was about 20 years older than me. She was my godmother, and had apparently insisted that I was named after her. Something which I did not thank her for when I was given the nickname Glory, Glory, Hallelujah at school. One of my father's favourite dad jokes was that she was Gloria and I was Glory B. Glo had been born in Derry before the family moved to Dublin, and we all knew the story of how she was born very prematurely, just 11 months after her brother, an Irish twin. And she was so tiny that she was nursed in a shoebox in front of the old range. One day, apparently, there was a blowdown of soot, and she was covered in it. I'm sure that didn't help her wee underdeveloped lungs at the time. The house in Dublin was very popular for all the Dublin cousins to go to for holidays, and some of the cousins who didn't have much money even stayed there on their honeymoon. My older sister used to spend a fair part of the summer holidays there and would come back with a Dublin accent. Aged just 6 or 7, she would be put on the bus in Derry in the care of the conductor, a lovely man called Michael who was a family friend, and she was met by my aunt and cousins at the other end. I wasn't invited much at that time, as I was less well behaved, a bit of a handful, prone to severe travel sickness and an occasional bedwetter. Not the most desirable travel companion or house guest. But when I was 6 years old, my turn came to travel to Dublin with my Auntie Joan and another one of the young Derry cousins. The visitors always took a plentiful supply of Derry's most famous produce, Doherty's mince and sausages. Poor Auntie Joan regretted her decision to take me with her fairly early in the journey, when I threw up most of the way to Monaghan, which was considered to be the halfway mark. At that time, the bus stopped in Monaghan long enough for everyone to have a quick meal in the cafe at the bus station. Of course, immediately feeling better once the bus had stopped, I ate a hearty meal and then threw up for most of the rest of the journey to Dublin. Once there, we were welcomed with open arms, and the house was soon filled with the smell of Doherty's mince frying. None of them had telephones in those days, so there was a lot of gossip and news to catch up on. Everyone was very kind to us, and my cousin's husband took us to the seaside at Bray the next day. Aunt Sally had asked me to bring her back some candy floss, and I tried my best, but all the way back in the bus, the candy floss melted and dripped onto my hand. I licked all the drips that fell until we arrived home with an empty stick and, of course, no candy floss. We also went to Dublin Zoo, which was such a thrilling experience. The most thrilling part for me was actually having my first taste of coffee from the adults' cups, and I have to say it was the start of a lifelong addiction for me. Little did we know then that another addiction was about to be revealed. That night there was a terrible thunderstorm, and Auntie Joan was terrified. She hid under the bedclothes reciting prayers, and she was furious with me every time there was a flash of lightning because I would shout, "There's another one." "But Auntie Joan," I said, reminding her of a firmly held belief among our townspeople, "didn't St. Columba say that no one in Derry would ever be struck by thunder and lightning?" "We're not in Derry now," she hissed from underneath the covers. Then she called to her sister, "For God's sake, Sally, have you no holy water? This is the worst storm I have ever seen." Sally promptly ran to her kitchen cupboard and drew the holy water bottle from deep inside. Muttering prayers, she sprinkled the liquid liberally about the house and then came into the bedroom where she sprinkled some more, a large drop landing on my upper lip. I licked my lip and was amazed to find a sharp, unfamiliar taste that made me cough and splutter. "Auntie Sally, your holy water tastes funny," 6-year-old me told her. "Our holy water doesn't taste like that." Sally sniffed the bottle and then tentatively took a sip, and she too coughed and spluttered. For the bottle contained not holy water, but poaching. Well, what a furore followed. My cousin and her husband were grilled at length, and poor Glo finally confessed to having hidden the poaching. It was many years later that I learned that when us children were sent out to play the next day, the house was thoroughly searched, and a stash of illicit alcohol was found in many hiding places, including a bottle of expensive whiskey secreted in the toilet cistern, a bottle of Middleton no less, which my horrified teetotal aunt poured down the sink along with the rest of the stash. I loved that holiday, and being so young I was largely unaware of all the drama that was unfolding. My cousin Glo, after a few false starts and stumbles, got the help she needed. She tried to do it on her own at first and then found Alcoholics Anonymous. Glo stayed off alcohol for the rest of her life, and she helped support many others in their struggle with alcohol dependency by working as a sponsor with AAA. In later life, she told me of her struggles and how she believed that her alcohol dependency had probably arisen from an unhappy marriage, the strain of the family living with her overbearing mother, and multiple health issues, which were probably a result of her very premature birth. She also worked for a building society at that time when Ireland was in deep recession and had to accompany the bailiffs when unfortunate families were evicted from their homes. This left a deep and lasting impression on her and forced her to leave the job eventually. Despite her problems, however, Glo always told her story with not an ounce of self-pity and a wicked sense of humour. She passed away just over a year ago. I always remember her very fondly, and especially when there's a thunderstorm, and I think of the poaching being sprinkled so liberally around the house. In her later years, she was very active in Facebook and always finished her comments with "Hugs Glo." We miss the Hugs Glo now. She also firmly believed that LOL meant lots of love rather than laughing out loud. No one had the heart to tell her when she commented on the death of her friend's mum. "So sorry for your loss. LOL. Hugs Glo."
Thank you so much, Gloria. What a glorious tribute to Glow. LOL and hugs to you all. And that's it for this podcast. Check out all the upcoming events on our website, 10by9.com. There are some extra evenings in there. And be sure to keep up with us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, where I'll keep you up to date with any news. Thanks as always to everyone who makes 10by9 happen. Margaret, Leanne and DJ Chris, who are irreplaceable. The wonderful team at the Black Box and all our venues. The 10by9 audiences who are so supportive and warm wherever we go. And of course, all our storytellers. But the biggest thanks this week goes to Bevin O'Donnell, Norman Meharry and Gloria O'Connor. I'm Paul Doran and I'll be back with another podcast soon. But for now, bye bye.